Hi, my name is Nick Nason. I'm a UK immigration lawyer, and today we're going to go through an online British citizenship application by naturalisation on the online form. So the first place to find the form is if you Google this here, you should be able to go onto the gov.uk website, which is here. And fill in the form online. So you should come to the Apply for British Citizenship by Naturalisation page, and it gives you a few bits and pieces to be aware of in terms of the requirements. Not all of the requirements, we'll go through those as we proceed through the presentation. And at the bottom, it invites you to apply now. And this is the application portal that you will be answering the questions that the government will be asking you for the purposes of the application. So it asks you to provide some basic details here, and the first thing it will ask you for is an email address, so that it can verify that. So I'm providing this now, and you will receive a verification email, which you will need to verify before making the application itself. So here it asks you to confirm who the email belongs to, and as you can see, it can either belong to you or an immigration lawyer. So for example, if I was filling this out on behalf of a client, I would put the answer would be immigration advisor based in the UK. In lots of applications, most applications, they're fairly straightforward, and you don't necessarily need a lawyer. If there are issues that you think that are concerning, having watched this presentation and having looked at the guidance that I'm going to take you to, then it may be useful to have someone review the application, and that's something that I do fairly regularly for clients. Once or twice a week, I'll look at a citizenship application in a review. So that would normally be kind of appropriate if there was something in particular that was worrying you, or you just wanted that peace of mind in order to continue with the application. But as it is, we're going to indicate that I'm the applicant here, and that we don't have an immigration advisor in the UK. So this is the main kind of portal where you're going to be answering all the questions for the purposes of the application. Unfortunately, you can't see all the questions in advance, so either you can fill out one of these forms yourself in order to get an idea of what the questions are, and then come back to it. You don't have to make the application immediately. The form will exist for, I think it's 4 months at the time of recording, before it's automatically deleted if it's not been submitted. So you can make or set up the application form quite far in advance of when you're planning to apply. Or you can just watch this presentation, and it should give you a good idea of what the questions are that you're going to be asked. So you're not completing the form on behalf of someone else. So you've got to put your name, which I've put here, and it's got to be the same name that you have in your passport. Indicate if you have any other names. For example, if you have a maiden name, and confirm that this is the email address that the Home Office can contact you on. The Home Office will generally use your email to contact you. They don't post things in the regular post as much these days, and they're moving towards a model where they don't really post anything at all. So it's mainly going to be email and kind of digital level documentation that you're going to communicate with the Home Office with for the purposes of this application. Put in a phone number, although I haven't received much communication. I can't think of really any communication at all from the Home Office in naturalisation applications by phone, but you put in the details anyway. And your postal address. Again, it's unlikely that you'll receive things in the post these days, having the Home Office moved over to digital model. is this where you live? Yes. And then I'm going to put a date more than 5 years ago. But if you haven't lived in your address for 5 years, then you will need to provide the other addresses that you've lived there, where you've lived in the other period of time. So citizenship ceremony, you're asked here which council, local authority you live in for the purposes of where you'd like to have the citizenship ceremony. The citizenship ceremony is the end of the process. If your application is approved by the Home Office, it then gets passed over to the local authority, which you indicate here, who invite you for the citizenship ceremony, where you go and swear allegiance to the Queen and go through that process. So I'm going to put Westminster, so that's where the office is based. Sex and relationship status, just enter here. So it asks you here if you're a EEA national. What it means by EEA national is European Economic Area national. So essentially, if you're a European national, then you have to indicate that in the form here. The reason it's asking you to indicate that is because the way that a European national would prove that they've been resident in the UK is likely to be slightly different to a non-European national because of the free movement rules that existed before the UK left the European Union, and the kind of EU settled status scheme, which came into effect after Brexit. So, because of free movement rules, it's unlikely that, or lots of European nationals don't have a formal document to confirm that they had indefinite leave to remain or permanent residence in the UK. You could obtain a document, but lots of individuals didn't. So that's why the question is asked about European nationals here. So are you a EEA or Swiss national? I'm going to put no. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to be from the US. But just so you can see what answers you will be providing, we'll use your indefinite leave to remain, including ILR granted under the EUSS, to apply for British citizenship. So if you have obtained status, indefinite settled status under the EU settled status scheme, then you should have an email or a decision from the Home Office, usually by email, usually a PDF attached to the email, and it's the date of that that letter decision that you need to enter here. So as I say, I'm going to indicate no here. So the next question is about your nationality, so I'm going to put United States, and same here, and place of birth New York. If I can type. Date of birth, again putting in a fictional date of birth for the purpose of this presentation, passport. So again, indicating the details that are contained on my passport, fictionalized for the purpose of this presentation, and that should be it for that. So it says I can provide this passport if required, and the point at which you would normally provide the passport is when you attend the biometrics appointment. So just to give you an overview of the application process, the first thing that happens is you fill out this form, and when you're ready to apply, you pay the fee. After you pay the fee, it moves you through to a separate portal run currently at the time of recording by Soprasteria or UK VCAS, which is the Home Office corporate partner. And what they will do is they will enable you to upload your documents on the portal, the supporting documents that you can use in support of your application, which we'll come to, and also the book your appointment to give your biometrics. So when you go to your appointment to provide your biometrics, all you're doing normally is taking your passport, and you'll have your picture taken and give your fingerprints. And once that process is finished, then the application then gets sent over to the Home Office for a decision. In terms of and then once a decision's been made, you then have the invitation from the local authority to the citizenship ceremony. In terms of timeframes, looking at the service standard for decisions is about 6 months for a decision to be made by the Home Office, and at the moment, at the time of recording in early 2022, decisions are taking that amount of time. In terms of the actual process of uploading and collating all the documents and the evidence, depending on your situation, sometimes that can be quite onerous, depending on how much evidence you need to prove residence and stuff like that. We're going to cover that process in a different video. So this process of the online application is going to be what we're going to concentrate on here, and the upload process, document collation, and the covering letter, how to prepare one, is going to be the subject of a separate video, which I'm going to be hopefully recording at some point soon after this one. Okay, so after we have gone through the passport details, it will ask you if you've got a national identity card, which I'm going to indicate no, and it's going to ask if I have any other nationalities, which I'm going to say no, but just so you can see, if you do have other nationalities, it's going to ask you to provide details of those. So the country, dates you've held the citizenship of that other country from and to, if it's not held at the current time. If you still hold it, then obviously you tick that. Okay, so going to say no to that and move on to the date that you were granted indefinite leave to remain. So this is a key requirement of the British Citizenship application process for naturalisation. Essentially, you need to have held indefinite leave to remain or settled status. In most cases, you will need to have held those for a 12-month period. It's possible to not require indefinite leave to remain or settled status if, for example, you have right of abode, but in most cases, or other status, which means there's no limit on your time to be in the UK, but in most cases it will be either you've got settled status or you've got indefinite leave to remain and you've held that for 12 months. The only exception to that is if you are married to a British national, in which case that requirement does not apply. You don't have to have held indefinite leave to remain for that 12 months. You still need indefinite leave to remain, but you don't have to have held it for a 12-month period at the time of the online application. Okay, so I'm going to indicate in my application that I was granted indefinite leave to remain on the 1st of Jan 2020, so I've held that for 12 months. I'm going to say that I don't have a national insurance number, but if you do, then you should put it in there. The Life in the UK test, you will need to have passed the Life in the UK test for the purposes of this naturalisation application. There are some limited exemptions, but in general you need to have passed it. And it comprises a test where you ask questions about life in the UK and what happens in the UK and what British people like to do in their spare time. The questions are slightly strange and lots of British people fail it, but in general it's pretty straightforward. And there's a book you can get, which is, I think this may have been updated, but this is the book that you can, with all the test questions in it, and which you can use to revise. And most of the clients that I have don't have any issues with it whatsoever. So it's not something to worry you too greatly. I think with a bit of work you can normally pass it without any issues. So again, I'm going to put a reference in here just for the purposes of this form. That's not working. There we go. So you'll be asked to give details about your parents, so their names, date of births, where they were born, and the nationalities. I'm going to just indicate that I don't have these details, but just be aware that you'll need to provide those details if you do have them. And then we get to the section on convictions and other penalties. This is essentially the good character requirement. The Home Office have a requirement that if you, essentially if you've got serious criminality or convictions, then that will prevent you from becoming a British citizen. You can also fail to meet the good character requirement test if you have kind of minor convictions or things that aren't even convictions. The Home Office consider you, even though you haven't received a conviction or committed an offence in the eyes of the criminal courts, you may have still be considered to have bad character or bad conduct or bad associations and stuff like that. So if there is something that you think that you're worried about, either because you've got a formal conviction or you've got anything else that's listed in this list. So, for example, it says penalties for driving insurance, driving disqualifications. Usually, that won't that won't be enough for a refusal under the bad character guidance. But if you're worried about it, then what I suggest you do is you read the good character guidance, which you can find online, and it will take you to the relevant kind of conduct that you're worried about, and it will give you an explanation of what the Home Office approach would be to that conduct. So that's definitely worth a read before you make an application. And if you're still unclear, then that's the kind of thing that you'd speak to a lawyer about. Get a one-off consultation and get them to give you their advice on what they've seen in terms of whether it's something that's going to be a big issue in the application. So I'm going to indicate that. So I'm going to indicate no. But for example, if you select driving offence, it will ask you to provide details like this. So you'll need those in the application if you do have them. For example, this is another example of the detail that you have to give for other types of offence. So I'm going to take no for the purpose of this presentation. The sex offenders register, same. I'm just going to take no. Again, bankruptcy. This is all part of the same good character requirement. So this is something that you can check in the good character requirement guidance. So there's a question about non-applying dependents. That means children that you've got so non-applying dependents it's basically children that you've got who are not listed on the application, who are not applying for citizenship at the same time as you are. And the question is actually related to whether they've got any criminal convictions, which is a bit strange. So if you type yes, then they will ask you about their character. So it's like an extension of the good character requirement, which is a bit strange, but anyway, I'm going to put no here. Again, this is all part of the good character requirement. This is a question about war crimes, unlikely to apply to many people. Same with terrorist activities and terrorist organisations. So there's a requirement in a UK naturalisation application to have 2 referees. The purpose of the referees is to verify your identity as an applicant. There are various requirements for how that referee needs to know you and to qualify as a referee, but broadly they need to have known you for 3 years, and at least one of the 2 referees you provide should be a professional person. The other one should be over the age of 25. Preferably they should both be professional people. There's a list of what an acceptable professional person means for the purposes of this requirement in Home Office guidance, and there's a pretty detailed article on my website on edgewaterlegal.com which sets out all the requirements of that a referee must adhere to and the criteria they have to meet. So definitely have a look at that if you're considering You don't know whether the referee meets the requirement. In my experience, it's very rare for the Home Office to contact referees, and I can't remember in any of my cases where that's ever happened. So it's something that to just bear that in mind, I guess. So in the application, you have to put their details in, and they will also have to sign a form in addition to this. So I'm just putting in some fictitious details here. I'm not going to bother putting in an address, but you'll have to, and provide any addresses of they've lived out in the last 3 years if it's not their current address. So again, I'm going to put, in fact, I can just put TBC. So you have to provide an email address and a phone number, and also their profession. And if they've got a British passport, then I will ask for their passport number. So you're going to have to ask them for that as well. And then also how you know them. So for example, work colleague. You then have to do the same thing for your second referee, Amanda Doyle. Again, these are I'm just putting these details in for the purpose of this presentation. You will have to put the actual information in. So I'm going to say no, and then I'm going to say another work colleague. Okay, so the question about the biometric residence permit, if you have a BRP, as a biometric residence permit, you can put the details in here. If you are a European national, for example, it's very unlikely that you'll have a BRP, so it's not a requirement of the naturalisation application. It's just asking for these details because it does, but just because you don't have one, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be eligible for the application. So I'm going to say no, I don't have a BRP from a previous period, but if I say yes, it's going to ask me to provide the details. So all this information should be available on the BRP itself. So I'm just going to say no for simplicity. Previous applications. So when it's asking about previous applications, it means any previous visa applications. And if you are a non-EU national, then it's likely you'd have to have applied for a visa to come to the UK, and then at least one or two other visa applications to remain in the UK after that, including your indefinite leave to remain application. So you'll need to put those details into this application and be aware of those details. For EU nationals, it may be that you applied pre-Brexit for a residence document of some description, and in which case you put that application in. Otherwise, it might be that you applied under the EU settled status scheme. It's likely that you applied under the EU settled status scheme, in which case you should put in the details of that application. So I'm going to put in previous application. So I'm going to put my name. So again, it says put the date of application if known. So a lot of people don't know when they made their application. So I'm going to say that I made my application on the 1st of March 2010. The reference number, it may be, if it's an entry clearance application, which it could be, going to be GWF, something like that. It's made in New York, which is where my fictitious character is from. And I'm going to say no, my fingerprints weren't taken. So if you have made an application, then that's the information that's going to be asked, and then it's going to ask you if there's any other application. So I'm going to say no, but usually it would be, if you're a non-European national, you're going to have made an entry clearance application, and then you're going to have made either an indefinite leave to remain application, at least those two, plus maybe switching applications or extension applications once you're here. So usually that might be a 2 or 3 or 4 applications that you've made to be listed in the application form. Okay, so it asks about my partner. I think I indicated that I was married, so I'm going to put in Mrs. Kelly Thompson. Again, just making up names here. That's not a person that I know. Your partner's name is not known by any other name. It asks for nationality, so I'm going to say United States again, and put in date of birth for Kelly. And I'm going to say she's not naturalised British citizen. Here, the question is asking you this because if she's British, then that changes the qualifying period for how long you need to have spent in the UK for the purposes of this application. So there's a 3-year qualifying period if you're married to a British national, which is a Section 6.2 application. For everyone else who's not married to a British national, it's a Section 6.1 application, and the qualifying period is a 5-year period. So that's the key difference when you're applying if you're married to a British citizen. And that's why it's asking you these questions here. So town and country of birth, again, you should enter that based on the information in the passport that they have to be accurate. And then the address, again, enter that. I'm just putting TBC because it's not relevant. So marriage and civil partnership. So we're going to say that we got married in 2009, and then it's going to ask you where did you marry? So we're going to say New York. And if you've been married previously, then you need to provide that. I'm going to say no, but yes, so you can see the questions that you're going to be asked. So previous partner, you'll be asked to put their name in, and you'll be asked their country of nationality and date of birth. And then it will be asking you for the date of your previous marriage, and it would also ask you after this question why it ended. So, for example, death or divorce or whatever. So, I'm just going to put no for previous marriages, and I'm going to put no for details of children, but again, if it will ask you if they live with you, you can say yes. So that's that on family, and then it's going to ask you about your employment. So the key reason they ask you about your employment is for the Home Office, for the purposes of the application, the best evidence or the expected evidence of residence from the Home Office's point of view is a letter from your employer. So if you're currently employed and you've been employed for 5 years, then a letter from your employer stating that you've been employed for that time at the office or wherever it is in the UK. For the Home Office, that's the best evidence that you can provide of residence. That's the evidence they suggest in their guidance. If you can't provide all the stamps in your passport. So usually what you would do is you take a scan of your whole passport, and you could then track all the stamps in and out. For lots of people, for example, EU nationals, and for people who use the e-gates in coming in and out of the UK, that's not it's not sufficient because they don't get stamped in and out. So for those individuals, EU nationals, and for e-gate nationals, the letter from the employer and letters from previous employers is usually the evidence that I would advising a client to get hold of as their best evidence. And so this is the place in the form where you provide that information about your employer. So let's say I'm currently employed, and then I would say, for example, I am a solicitor, and that I am self-employed, and providing the details of my employer, and just for purposes of this application, and you will be asked to provide a tax office reference number, which is usually something like this, 1, 2, 5, something like that. You can ask your employer to provide that information, and then if you confirm that, it will ask you if you've got any other previous employment. So the question here is, have you had any work over the past 10 years or since you came to the UK? So this is usually something of a pain point for people who come to me and they've been in the UK for 20 years, and they have to basically piece together their employment history. Sometimes it's more straightforward if you only have 2 or 3 employers, but sometimes you might be temping, or you've got part-time jobs or whatever. This all should be declared on the form. So you need to provide that information if you can in the form, and you'll be asked to provide it here. So like this. So I'll ask you to provide the start date and the end date. I'm going to say no, I don't have any previous employment details, and that should then take me out of that section, and then it will ask me about my arrival date in the UK, and it will give you, so the arrival date section gives you a bit of information on the residence period. So again, as we've discussed, the residence requirement is 5 years if you are not married to a UK national, 3 years if you're married to a UK national. And there is an absence requirement here, where during your period of residence, you can't have been absent from the UK for more than a certain period of time. And it's going to ask you in the form to list those absences. So let's put in our fictitious date of arrival, and let's say we arrived at Heathrow. Before moving on to the next one, the form just confirms the absence requirements. So you can't have spent more than 270 days outside the UK in the qualifying period if you're married, so that's a 3-year period. But for everyone else who's not married to a British national, so the 3-year period is for people who are married to a British national, not just married in general, I should clarify. So 450 days in the 5-year period, you can't have been absent from the UK for more than 450 days during the 5-year period. And if you have, then you need to meet kind of additional, if you have been absent from the UK for that period of time and above, then it's not the kind of end of the story. You can still meet the requirement. You just have to ask for the Home Office to waive the requirement, and they will only waive it in certain circumstances, and those circumstances are listed in the guidance, which I'll take you to. In addition, you can't have been outside the UK for more than 90 days in the last 12 months. So that means the last 12 months leading up to the date of the application. And you can't have been in the UK illegally during the 3 or 5 year qualifying period. Okay, so here we're going to look at the how to enter one of the absences, so you can see. So we'll put in yes. Before we do, there's quite a good explanation here of what's declarable and what's not. So if you leave the UK on a Monday and come back on a Tuesday, for the purposes of the form, that's not an absence, because you're not outside the UK for one clear day. If you leave the UK on the Monday and you come back on the Wednesday, then that is one absence for the purposes of the form. So when you put in your absences, you have to provide this information. So you provide the country visited and the reason for the trip, so just put business, and then the dates of the trip. So let's say just took place and came back last week. Last week is then. And then it will ask you if there's any additional trips outside the UK. And I'm going to put no, but obviously you need to list all of those trips. It will then, because of the way that we filmed this video, we've had to go back and refilm a few bits and pieces. So this is the check your answers section, which normally you'd come to after you've completed all of the questions, but we've missed out these last 4 or 5 here. So just to go through those quickly, they're pretty straightforward. This question is, do you plan for your main home to be in the UK if the application is successful? This is part of the future intentions requirement, where essentially you have to show that you intend to live in the UK for the foreseeable future. And you normally answer that question yes. Then you'll be asked about the residence requirements and whether you meet them. And here there's quite a good explanation of how these work. So over the 3 or 5 year qualifying period, 3 years for spouses of British nationals, 5 years for everyone else, you need to show you haven't been absent for more than 270 days if it's the 3 year, or 450 days if it's the 5 year. So that's what the absences that you're listing in the form are designed to, that question is designed to find out whether you meet that requirement. Here I'm just putting in yes. If you say no, you are asked to give reasons why you don't meet them. And that, of course, isn't the end of the story. You can still apply for naturalisation, even if you are above the absences threshold. You will just need to ask the Home Office to exercise discretion in your case, and you need to explain why they should exercise discretion. And the best place to look in terms of whether the Home Office will exercise discretion in your case, for example, if you are out of the UK for exceptional or compelling circumstances, for example, because of the pandemic, or because you have to travel for work, there's different reasons that the Home Office will accept, depending on how far above the absences that you are. And so what you need to look at is the policy guidance for this application, which sets all of this out. So I'm going to say yes here, that I do meet the requirement. And then I'm going to just ask these other questions here. Basically ask similarly, like, are there any reasons why you can't meet the British citizenship requirements? And then just to explain, if you don't, how do you not meet them, and why are you still applying, or on what basis are you still applying? So in these questions, I would usually, it gives you the opportunity to provide further details. And what I always do in these applications is refer to a covering letter, and then in the covering letter you can explain in kind of greater detail whatever the issue is. We're not going to cover covering letters in this presentation. We're going to look at covering letters and how to prepare one in the next video, which is going to also cover the upload process and also the kind of evidence that you can provide, have a closer look at the evidence that you can provide in support of the various aspects of the citizenship application. So I'm just going to say no to both of these. And then the final question on the form is also kind of a catch-all. Do you have any other details that you'd like to be considered? And again, if there are, then I would normally put C covering letter. But here there's no other issues, and it will then come up with completed here, and you can move on to across your checklist at the top. So I'm going to, it would normally take you to the documents section here, and it gives you the list of documents that you should be providing. It doesn't go into a lot of detail about exactly what evidence you should provide for each of the different requirements, and that's why there's going to be the separate video where we're going to look at that in a bit more detail. And you have to tick these boxes even if you haven't got the relevant document. So and what you do in that situation is you'd explain in a covering letter look, I've had to tick this box, but you know, I haven't been able to get this document for whatever reason, and explain the position. So the other thing that you will need to provide is a referee declaration, and you are able to download that from the form itself. And here you would put in your photograph and your name, and then the referee would complete the rest of the document, sign and date here. And again, it's a digital upload process, so the physical document doesn't need to be sent anywhere. You just need to have a scan of the signed copy of the document, which will then be uploaded with the rest of your evidence. So here we've got that box ticked, and then, for example, I've ticked that I'm self-employed, so it's asking for my most recent tax year account statement and HMRC tax return. Again, we'll look at the evidence that you would normally provide in an application like this for different types of application in our next video. So as I say, we'll look at the other documents that you can provide in support of meeting these requirements in a separate video, and which is not going to be forming part of this presentation. So let's move on here through the declaration. This is just saying that you confirm everything's true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief. And you will then move on to the payment screen here, where you pay your extortionate fee, and it will take you then to a payment page, and after which point you can't change any of the answers. So basically, until this point in the application, you can go back and change anything that you want. But after you paid, then essentially the application has been filed, and if you want to change anything substantially, as in it's going to cause an issue in terms of whether it's going to be accepted or not, then you'd need to withdraw your application and ask for a refund. Once you have paid, you'll be taken to this last step, further actions, which is where you'll set up your portal with Sopra Steria or UK VCAS, which is the Home Office's corporate partner, which managed the biometric booking and the document upload process. You just need to remember that if you haven't got all the documents that you need, they need to be uploaded before you attend your biometric appointment. So there's no good paying on the Monday, attending your biometric appointment on the Tuesday, because you need to have all your documents uploaded by the time you attend your appointment. So that will be an issue if you don't have all your documents ready at the time you apply. In terms of what I would normally do is download a PDF of the application form, and it will come up something like this. So you can check all your answers, and the good thing about this is that it also calculates your absences days, so it means you don't necessarily have to do it yourself. So if you can just put everything into the list of trips, then it will calculate the number of full days absences that you've had. I think the form allows you to enter 30 absences. If you have more than 30 over your relevant period, then you can put the excess in a covering letter or on a separate sheet of paper, and then upload that in support of your application. In terms of when clients approach us to ask us to review their applications, normally they'd send us a download of the PDF of the form, plus their supporting documents, plus a list of their queries that they've got if they do have any issues with the application and they're worried about this aspect or that aspect. And then we would then get together on a kind of Zoom call, and we'd go through the form, we'd share a screen, and I'd go through all the documents with them. So if that's something that you feel like you need, then get in touch and let me know, and we can arrange a one-off consultation. You can have a look at the one-off consultation link, which should be below this video. If you feel like you need further help with the document upload process, or the evidence collection and what the evidence looks like in terms of when you make the application, and putting that all together with the covering letter, then look out for our next video and subscribe below, and you should get a ping when that comes through. But either way, wish you the best of luck with your application, and I hope you've found this session helpful.